our paschal lamb has been sacrificed. Therefore, let us keep the feast.
The Holy Gospel according to Matthew.
Glory to you, O Lord.
After the Sabbath, as the first day of the week was dawning, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to see the tomb. And suddenly there was a great earthquake, for an angel of the Lord, descending from heaven, came and rolled back the stone and sat on it. His appearance was like lightning, and his clothing white as snow. For fear of him, the guards shook and became like dead men. But the angel said to the women, "Do not be afraid. I know that you are looking for Jesus who was crucified. He is not here, for he has been raised, as he said. Come, see the place where he lay. Then go quickly and tell his disciples, he has been raised from the dead, and indeed is going ahead of you to Galilee. There you will see him. This is my message for you." So they left the tomb quickly with fear and great joy and ran to tell his disciples. Suddenly Jesus met them and said, "Greetings." And they came to him, took hold of his feet, and worshipped him. Then Jesus said to them, "Do not be afraid. Go and tell my brothers to go to Galilee. There they will see me." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
Christ, our paschal lamb, has been sacrificed. Therefore, let us keep the feast.
Please be seated. I dare say that this current age seems to be a fearful time, shaken by the shifting tectonic plates of politics, culture, religion, and economics. There is fear and doubt and anxiety enough for everyone. Saber rattling with Syria and Russia, and North Korea and China. Attempts to repeal equity, human rights, and voter rights laws, thus legislating discrimination. The decline of the church here in the United States, mirroring the decline already seen in Europe. And job scarcity, pay inequity, and rising costs. All hitting like subterranean shock waves, shaking the very ground beneath our collective feet. With such seismic shocks rippling through our culture, some of us may fear the terrain of our national identity has been changed forever. And that's just to speak of our national psyche in this current fearful age. I dare say many, if not all of us, have also felt the rolling and shaking of personal crises, anxiety over changing or lost jobs, disappointment over life's ideals not quite measuring up, grief over lost health, lost lives, lost years, lost loves. All seismic shockwaves which lay riven the very ground of our being. Yes, it is a fearful age. Yet maybe it always has been. Maybe there has always been a sense of dread and fear that upsets the ground beneath the feet of every age this side of Eden. It lays riven every human soul who feels in some way separated from God. Of all the gospel accounts, it is the evangelist Matthew alone who associates an earthquake with Easter morning. Suddenly there was a great earthquake, for an angel of the Lord descending from heaven came and rolled back the stone and sat on it. His appearance was like lightning, and his clothing white as snow. By the way, if I get to be an angel, I want to be that angel. That's a cool angel. For Matthew, the angelic being is the source of the earthquake, which results in fear such that the guards watching the tomb are frightened nearly to death. For Matthew, it is this earthquake, this theophany, this show of divine power which lays riven the tomb. The disciples, that is Mary Magdalene and the other Mary, are also understandably fearful. It's no wonder then that the heavenly being's first words are, "Do not be afraid." Have you ever thought about how many times "do not be afraid" are the first words, the first message of the messengers from God? Well, I'm glad you asked. It's 65 times, in fact. 65 times the message from God is, "Do not be afraid." As the story goes, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary will not only hear that message from the angel, but from the risen Jesus himself. They're heading back, and suddenly there is Jesus, and the first thing he says is, "Hey." Okay, it says greetings, right? That's the formal way, but he's just, "Hey." And then he says to them, "Do not be afraid." An earthquake and an empty tomb had riven open the ground of their being. They had been fearful, disoriented, more confused than even they had been following Jesus' death. And then the risen one, Jesus the Christ, came to them, meeting them in the midst of their fear, speaking to them a word of peace and hope. Do not be afraid. The American poet Christian Wyman survived a Texas childhood shaken by violence and unsettled by the charismatic Christian culture that surrounded him. He was agnostic until he became actively religious again in his late 30s. Then he was diagnosed with a rare form of incurable blood cancer. In his poetry and essays, he gives voice to the hunger for faith and the challenges of faith for people like us, people living in this current culture of fear. Let's listen in as he describes and reads his poem, "Every Riven Thing."
So here's a poem I wrote. This was actually the first poem that I wrote after years of silence. All those years I mentioned, I had gone, I think it was 3 years, without having written a poem, and in the middle of all those dramatic things happening to me, this was one of them. I sat down one day and found myself writing again, and this poem came to me all of a sudden, and it was quite a shock to write a poem, and quite a shock to write a poem, especially like this one, because it's highly formal, but it's not in a form that previously existed. To a lot of people, it sounds like a villanelle, which repeats 2 lines every stanza and uses 2 rhymes throughout the whole poem. That's not what this poem does, but it does take 1 line, "God goes belonging to every riven thing he's made," and it changes the syntax over and over in every stanza so that it means something different. And the poem is called "Every Riven Thing." God goes belonging to every riven thing he's made, sing his being simply by being the thing it is. stone and tree and sky, man who sees and sings and wonders why God goes. Belonging to every riven thing he's made means a storm of peace. Think of the atoms inside the stone. Think of the man who sits alone, trying to will himself into a stillness where God goes, belonging. To every riven thing he's made, there is given one shade, shaped exactly to the thing itself. Under the tree, a darker tree. Under the man, the only man to see, God goes, belonging to every riven thing. He's made the things that bring him near, made the mind that makes him go. A part of what man knows, apart from what man knows, God goes, belonging to every riven thing he's made.
God goes, belonging to every riven thing he's made. To the disciples on that first Easter morn came the message, "Do not be afraid. I know that you are looking for Jesus who was crucified. He is not here, for he has been raised, as he said. Come, see the place where he lay. Then go quickly and tell his disciples, he has been raised from the dead, and indeed he is going ahead of you to Galilee. There you will see him." With that Easter morning earthquake, God lays riven the once mighty power of death and the grave, and the very ground of what the disciples thought it meant to be human is flipped upside down. The sting of death, that most fearful of things, was shown to be weak in comparison to the power of God. The killing effect of hate and violence was flipped on an end by the landscape-altering magnitude of God's love. Suddenly, with that Easter morning earthquake, a seismic shock wave has rippled out across space and time, and everything has changed. And the risen one whom death could not hold, Jesus the Christ, goes ahead of his disciples to Galilee. Now, for the disciples, Galilee is that place where they are from. It's their everyday lives. God in Jesus goes ahead of them into their everyday lives. That is where the risen Christ will be seen. And as with the disciples of old, so too with us contemporary disciples. God goes, belonging to every riven thing he's made, into our everyday lives, into the collective and personal fear and doubt and anxiety of this current age. And God announces to us all, do not be afraid. In gushing baptismal waters, in riven bread and flowing wine, in this broken body united as the church, God goes, belonging to every riven thing he has made. And nothing, not cross, nor tomb, not everyday life, nor incurable illness, nor the end of life, nothing can lay riven God's love for us, nor God's presence with us. God goes, belonging to every riven thing he's made. And with God's belonging, our riven lives, all that uneven ground of our being, all that is fear-inducing, everything we once believed to have power over us is defeated. God goes ahead of us into our Galilee. There we can trust that God goes, belonging.